Hello and welcome to a new interview from MinnMax. MinnMax is a place about games, friends, getting better. In this interview, we're very excited to have a couple folks from Airship Syndicate. We have the president of the company, Ryan Stefanelli, and also Joe Mad, who's the CEO and creative director. These two have had a wild journey through the game industry, so that's the point of this interview, is to wring some knowledge out of them, because they created the Darksiders franchise with the other folks at Vigil. Then that studio imploded along with THQ, and they started Airship Syndicate, where they revived Joe Mad's comic franchise, Battle Chasers. They also worked on Darksiders Genesis. Then they had Ruined King, which is the League of Legends RPG, and now Wayfinder, which was a live service game that they're working on with Digital Extremes from Warframe fame. In this interview, they call that DE, so don't be alarmed. That's Digital Extremes, the developers behind Warframe. But that game got canceled, and so they took that live service game Wayfinder, which was free to play, and they converted it into a co-op action RPG experience, which is available in early access on Steam now, and the 1.0 release is coming soon. So in this interview, they talk about the super challenging development of the Darksiders franchise. They talk about the game called 1881 that they were developing at Vigil Games before the whole thing got shut down. They talk about working with Sony on a Sly Cooper game on PSP. There's a lot about pitches, actually. They also talk about their pitch with Konami for a Castlevania 3D Metroidvania co-op experience that eventually pivoted and became Wayfinder. If you enjoy this interview, you can always help support MinnMax in a big way by hitting subscribe. It's a small click for you, but it's a huge thing for us. Or you can go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. If you jump in at the $5 tier, you're directly supporting independent games media, and you're unlocking the podcast version of all of our interviews, early access, and also ad-free access to the MinnMax Show podcast, the podcast version of the Deepest Dives, which are the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet, our Patreon exclusive podcast called Bonus Pod every single week. There's a ton of content in the bonus podcast feed. And special thanks to Airship Syndicate. If you jump in and support MinnMax on Patreon at any tier, even the $2 tier, before Friday, August 16th is over, we will DM you with a Steam code for Wayfinder. So if you like Darksiders and you want to check out that talent's new game Wayfinder and support independent games media at the same time, patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Jump in before Friday the 16th. But without further ado, here's Ryan and Joe. Ryan and Joe, welcome to MinnMax, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's like, you have been people in the industry that's like, I gotta talk to again. You've had such a wild journey. So hopefully with this interview, we can unpack it all a little bit. But
it's gotten wilder.
Oh my God, I want to know all this stuff. So I met you guys back, I don't know if you remember, back in 2011 when I was at Game Informer as a video producer, but I was down there for the Darksiders 2 cover story trip.
So we were just when the news about Game Informer broke yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
I was telling that specific story about how I kind of fell in love with Minneapolis because we went there for that trip. Yep, there's the cover. I saw it.
Cover this thing, yeah.
Yeah, going to the Game Informer office. And it was during the winter, so it was there was like a heavy snowstorm that came through. And I remember we went out drinking in like the warehouse district or something like that in the area that night. And I had such a blast hanging out with folks and having good food, having a few drinks. It's one of my favorite memories. One of my least favorite memories was being hungover on the plane the next day. So,
so hang on, it'd be interesting to have, like, from a developer perspective, was this like the pitch for the cover story then?
I don't know if that was.
I think we were showing them the game and just like to get like press on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was the pitch or if we were there after it was going to be the cover story to do interview content. I actually don't recall.
Yeah,
we had a good time.
Yeah, but it was my first time down in
sad to hear
Austin.
about about doors closing.
Yeah, brutal. I mean, did you have big thoughts? I mean, you must have interacted a lot with Game Informer throughout the years here.
I mean, the way the industry has been lately, I guess it wasn't like the biggest surprise, but obviously, it's been one of our favorite, game magazines like for decades now. I mean, I collected it as a fan before I ever even met those guys. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's sad, and we all were just kind of like, sending the news around the office, like, damn, and telling our stories.
Yeah, and it was like one of the last bastions of game print too, which was, when for those of us at our age, when we first got into games, that was the only way to get news. I used to go to the grocery store with my mom. We grew up in the Midwest, and so Cub Foods was our grocery store.
Yeah.
And I only went with her to go to the magazine aisle to see if there was a new issue of, I think, this predated Game Informer, I think, to my knowledge, but like EGM or Game Pro, and then Game Informer came on the scene years later. I I had subscriptions to and collected all of them. So
Yep.
Game Informer was like, at least in the US, one of the few remaining holdouts. So I was sad to see it go.
Yeah, but it was a nice trip down there in Austin. I remember, Joe, we filmed you drawing Death for Darksiders 2, and then we ended up, I wish I had the total, I should go back and dig it up, but we ended up auctioning off that drawing probably in like 2018 or something for charity. And it certainly went for hundreds and hundreds. So thanks for being up for that video, and then I guess secretly allowing us to auction off your art for charity.
Yeah, of course.
That's cool that you were there for that, though.
I vaguely remember drawing Death. I was like, did I have to draw something? But that was a separate thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of the uncomfortable thing. I know you get it all the time. I was like, hey, artist, can you just sit down and draw real quick? And it's like, look, this is what I do for work. I don't want to do a sloppy drawing, but you were a very good sport about the whole thing, so I appreciate it.
Was that the one with dust and with the eyeball in his mouth?
No.
I don't think so. I think it was just like a pretty simple headshot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But Ryan, I remember we did a video with you, and you were like walking through, showing how you made dungeons for Darksiders 2. And you said this line that stuck with me forever, where you're talking about like, puzzle design, yada, yada, yada. You're like, you just have to fill your dungeons with what we call Nuzzles, which are not quite a puzzles. And I was like, I think about that all the time. Like every time I play a Lego game or anything, it's like, here's something that's not quite a puzzle, but it feels puzzly. And I think back to you with Darksiders 2. I'm
pretty sure the term nuzzle, probably that term for a puzzle that isn't really a puzzle, lives on in, it's common vocabulary at Airship, but I'm sure at Gunfire too. I remember it was Dave Adams and I that came up with that term, because we were like, it's not really a puzzle, but it kind of distracts the player. It's a change of pace. It's not a puzzle. And then Nuzzle was born. And we had the same term for a creature that was not a boss.
Don't talk about it.
That was an escalation from, we didn't have time to make a boss, but we wanted to start with a base creature, create a variant of it, the traditional scale it up, give it a new move, make it difficult. And those were not a boss, and those were called Nosses. And it was such an inside joke that the Noss became an official creature in Darksiders 2. So when you see that, it's one of the towering, like War of the Worlds sized Strider things in the city gun sequence in Darksiders 2. It's called the Noss. That is a direct reference to Nos/Nuzzle. So.
Perfect. Yeah. And once you start seeing these words and thinking about it, you just start seeing it everywhere in the industry of like, there's so many situations of just
I don't think that one's going to catch on.
Well, you never know. But for the Nuzzle front, it's like, push this crate over here, and everybody knows how to do it. It's taking up your time. Isn't it fun? And the question is, I don't know, is it fun? I guess it's something to do.
We're getting into deep lore like in the first 5 minutes. It's going to be good. The deepest cuts.
The real purpose was just to break up the pacing, because sometimes you don't want to stop the player for a full puzzle, but you just want to give them a little activity that hopefully takes advantage of a fun mechanic, blowing something up or, grabbing something and throwing it. It's not a lot to figure out, but it's a little distraction.
Yeah. All right, Joe, zooming out. Where are you guys at these days? How are y'all feeling down there?
We're trying to navigate the chaos. We're at this point, like, pretty excited about Wayfinder, where it's going. 1.0, getting ready for the major relaunch. We already did an early access, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff still going in for the full launch. And obviously, it's not the game that we set out to make years ago, but in hindsight, everyone pretty much unanimously agrees it's a much better and more entertaining game. So we're doing good. We're excited about the future, just anxious. The last few months up to a launch are nerve-wracking and stressful, but I think the feelings are good. Studio's excited.
Yeah. What can you give? I know you've done it 1,000 times, but Ryan, can you give like an abridged summary of the journey of Wayfinder here? What happened before what? When did you pivot to what?
Yeah, I mean, if you go all the way back to the beginning, we pitched it not necessarily as a free-to-play title. We knew we wanted to make an online game as fans of MMOs, big WoW players and others. And even going all the way back, way back, Darksiders 1, when we pitched it, before we knew any better, we were pitching it as a 4-player co-op action-adventure game.
Right.
So you can go back 20 years, and that's kind of the game a lot of us always wanted to make. And I didn't think we'd get there this way, but when we had the opportunity to make Wayfinder, we were just excited to make an online world, something that we had hoped would be able to persist and endure. And when we talked to DE, we thought, hey, maybe this is a chance to try free to play, because they know it, we don't. So we partnered with them, and then, things happened as they did, and they decided to get out of being publishing around the same time that the game went through a pretty rough launch. And I'll tell you, the most interesting thing about the past, 6 to 7 or however long it's been now, oh gosh, almost a year, is how much fun it's been to be basically a self-published studio, which we have been since the cord was cut. We just started operating on our own, and that's really given us a chance to make some what we call just bold and decisive decisions, like the decision to just strip the service out of the game, take all the cosmetic stuff that was paid for and make it loot. All these things that we thought we couldn't do when we first proposed, and we all kind of looked around the room and went, yeah, this is crazy. We can't actually do this, right? And then we spent a week or two thinking about it and planning and doing deep dives. And, well, this wouldn't actually be that hard, and this wouldn't be that hard. And okay, maybe it'll take a month or two to strip the service out. And within a couple weeks, we can probably get some loot prototyped. And before we knew it, we had a better version of the game. And I don't think anybody would opt to do it this way. Certainly there is some unavoidable compromise in the game, because it was a live service game for 3.5, 4 years. But the way we've been able to pivot it in the amount of time that we've done it with the number of people that we've had, pretty remarkable, we think. And fortunately, that was backed up when the game did go live on Steam and shot back up to very positive, which we hadn't seen we'd never seen on Wayfinder. So that was extremely satisfying.
That's gotta be nice. Just everybody in the studio watching that when it rolls over and the reviews on Steam. It's like, okay, we did it. Look at the recent reviews, everybody. We're climbing out of this. We got it.
Yeah.
Well, and now there are people saying hey, I wish more games would do this instead of sunsetting, a free-to-play game. Just let it live as a offline co-op experience.
I mean, that's the crazy thing that I want to talk to you guys about is just you have done what a lot of people on my side of the fence are always screaming about, these live service games, just make it a co-op game. Why can't you just make Suicide Squad a single player game with Harley? We'd love to play it. I mean, you all have run the test and you're smiling. You say it's fun in the studio, but I mean, mission fully accomplished, more work than you thought, more stressful than you thought. Can you give some lessons to the rest of the industry for what that was actually like?
Well, it's really going to depend on the game, right?
Sure.
I think one benefit is we were it wasn't easy, but we did have, I guess the one benefit of the cord being cut so soon and so abruptly was that the game was in early access still. So the amount of content was limited. We'd only taken so many steps down the road, at least in terms of the game being live and in operation. We'd only gone so far down the road with it being what it was. So it did limit, I guess, so to speak, the damage when we finally did have to make the change. But I think it's a good life lesson in that things are almost never as easy or as hard as you think they'll be. And once we stopped telling ourselves how difficult it was going to be and we just did it, things started moving really quickly. Also, the game got quickly better. And, we made the analogy, whether it's a good one or not, that working in game dev is a lot like going to war because you have to put a lot of effort into it sometimes. And the teams that survive it, usually it means they won the war, right? Once we saw that the game was going to be good as a result, it made a lot of the effort worth it. It made a lot of the pain that got us to that point worth it because it was a cool game. And so I think that filled everyone's sails and helped push things forward. And it really saved morale to some degree because it obviously felt pretty shitty to have the game be canceled in effect.
Yeah, it kind of helped that we had no choice. I think that we just made it work. But like Ryan said, it does depend on the game. I think we were fortunate that this game could kind of spin into a cool action RPG. With a lot of the hooks we already had in there, it wasn't a complete transformation. It is substantially different, but it was not, like a game like Suicide Squad or something like that. I think would be quite a bit harder to pull off, but. I think we were fortunate that we were able to do it.
One thing you said though is, but we did have a choice. We could have just tried to move on to something else. We could have just actually let the game shut down.
Yeah.
And we believed that the game could be something that would, hopefully sustain itself. So there was a business case behind it, but a lot of it was emotional. We spent so much time working on this game that both for us as developers, having spent that amount of time making what we believed at its core. There's a cool game hiding out in there, despite all the technical problems we had at launch. And then also for the players who had bought it, we weren't the publisher, right? So we had no idea what it would mean if the game were just hard canceled, because we couldn't keep operating it as a free-to-play title. The industry was crashing all around us, so no publisher was really interested in putting the money in that would have been needed as a game that had been canceled. That really kind of put a stain on it as a free-to-play title. So we could have just let it be canceled and moved on to a new project or gone out and tried.
And to clarify, that's what I meant. It's like killing it. Right. Like it was do it or kill it. And
we didn't see that as an option, but technically it would have been.
Right.
But we thought, hell no. So that's why we did it.
So that has to be so tough. You say it's an emotional decision of like, well, if you invested, we're kind of pot committed emotionally in this game. We can't let it die. But you must have had very serious conversations about like, this is a huge decision to double down on this. You see studios do it quite frequently because I'd imagine from their perspective, it's like they're emotionally invested. They have a fan base that's screaming at them. It's like, well, full steam ahead. Like, how do you double check to make sure that as a company, it is smart to go full steam ahead on something like this?
I wish there was some way that we could vet that and say, oh, scientifically, this is the logical choice, but you really can't. Some of it's a wing and a prayer. You don't know how a game is going to land. That's part of what makes the game industry just hard for anyone. I think a lot of the blame gets put on how the business is run when studios shut down or games fail, and some of it is definitely deserved. But it's just also, it's like a hit-driven business, because sometimes you think you've made something fun, or you think you've made something players are going to care about, and one or both prove to not be true.
Yeah. And
the game's just dead. And most studios can't recover from that. And that's the nature of the beast, And in our case, we had 3 pretty successful games before Wayfinder that, allowed us it created some financial buffer for us. But it's costing us all of that to get Wayfinder to where it is. So yeah, we're hopeful for 1.0. There is still a lot more for us to show about the game when we get the other platforms online and we get some new content in, and some more features are coming. There's still more game people haven't seen. That's gonna. I think it could be something really. It's certainly gonna be unique. I'll put it that way.
Okay, so you haven't had the big party of mission accomplished yet. You're still in a all right, very positive
on
on Steam building.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible that the game will come out and people love the changes and think it's fun, and it just doesn't catch fire. You never know how a launch is going to go, so we're trying not to count our chickens and just make it as good as we can while it's in early access.
Yeah.
It's been very encouraging so far. I think if that early feedback to some of the changes was bad, we would have a different feeling. But just seeing the sentiment turn around and getting positive feedback from the players in early access has helped us. Like, it gave us a lot of confidence to keep going. So we're just opening the floodgates at this point.
Yeah.
How big is the team?
We're around 70 now.
Okay. Because there were layoffs earlier this year?
Yeah, we let 12 go earlier in the year. Yeah.
Okay. And you took a pay cut as well?
We did.
Yes.
Headline went around.
And those are still in effect.
Okay. Makes you laugh, Joe? Tough times?
Yeah, only because that was like circulating in the news like a bunch of times, and I was just like, it's not something that's like fun to talk about, but we did feel like, with the layoff, we've never had to do something like that before, and it was very hard, and we wanted to show that like, we are in this with our team, and we're not like, it's affecting us too. It should affect the people at the top.
Yeah.
As well, when you make decisions like that, and just kind of helped, I think, keep like the morale of the team up, and hopefully it's something we never have to do again. It's just tough. Because a lot of most of our friends are in this building. Like, we don't really. Speaking for myself, like I work with all my friends, and we're a pretty tight team, so. It's always tough to have to do that, but unavoidable.
Note to everyone out there, if you're not in this building, you're not Joe's friend.
Yeah. It's true. Look, no one's going to be upset.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, you guys have had just like a wild ride through the industry, and just it seems like you've always been on that quest for, and I guess everybody is, right, of just happiness, sustainability, content development. I mean, do you feel like you're in a pretty good spot now? Does it feel like, oh God, why do we tackle something as huge as Wayfinder? We should have stuck to smaller projects. Or where are you at on that quest for just the sweet spot of game development?
I don't know if there's just not a lot of time for regret, you know? Hindsight is easily 2020. We could probably look back and say, I wish we had kept doing games like Genesis and Ruin King and, you know, games of that size, but no risk it, no biscuit. We'd always wanted to make the game and the opportunity was there. So we took a swing. A good game resulted from it.
Yeah.
And like we've said, the story's not written yet.
Right.
So I will say, I mean, in the way that the industry is right now, it's definitely safer to work on smaller projects, preferably more than one, so that all your eggs aren't in one basket. So it's definitely something that we are considering once again. But the Wayfinder launch is really going to like determine where we put the eggs. And it's just a few months away. So, you know, it's going to be really important for us. But we have made large games, we've made small games before. So going back to something like that is, you know, again, we're fortunate that we know that world. We know how to make those games, small games, mid-sized games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be surprised to see our future resemble our past. I'll put it that way.
Full circle.
But, you know, I think even Wayfinder was big, but it still wasn't nearly the size of the Darksiders 2 team, for example. So we have a wide range of experience now, and I think we've enjoyed all of the challenges. Really, the only part of the Wayfinder experience we haven't enjoyed was the launch and subsequent cancellation of it.
Right.
That sucked. But the last 8 months has been some of the financial risk aside, and you know, obviously we had to let people go. That's all a byproduct of just how unstable Airship has been because of the cancellation, but also the industry as a whole, because all of those funding sources that come through publishers and investors who are hurting, who made their own mistakes, that trickles down to the developer, which trickles down to the employee. So it's a rough business landscape right now, but creatively, working on Wayfinder with this group this past 8 months has been incredibly satisfying because we've been able to do it ourselves. And that's scary because there's a lot you can do wrong when the world is your oyster, right? Maintaining discipline and focus can be tough, but we've had the team that's done it. I think we've actually stepped up in many ways. Could go either way. You could either get sloppy and just go off the rails, or what we did, which was really to double down on some of our organization and our planning in a very pragmatic way, really practical, and people just got shit done. Like, things just came together. It was pretty cool.
That's nice. Yeah, how are you feeling about the game industry at large? Like from the outside, a look at your journey. It's been so wild, obviously, with THQ and then going to crowdfunding and then partnering with Riot. I mean, it's just been a series of wild, I don't know, vantage points into the possibilities of the game industry. And it feels like the rug's getting pulled out from under you guys again and again and again. I just want to make sure you're doing okay over there.
Yeah, don't worry about us. We're
okay.
You build up armor to it, but also it's the industry. Like don't get into games if what you're looking for is stability or for things to be repeatable and predictable, because it is art at its core. So it's pretty crazy. It's entertainment. People's opinions of what's entertaining is constantly changing. The way people pay for it is constantly evolving. Like it's just not an easy, if you are expecting to come in and be able to predict through analytics or through, forecasts what's going to work and what's not, you're in for a rude awakening. And I think we've survived by being flexible. We've had no arbitrary rules about stay this size or only work on this kind of game. That's what led us to, Kickstarter was one way. Then we went back to the well. And even though Darksiders was technically work for hire, it felt like our IP still, right? Because it's like our baby. Riot was a complete curveball, but we went with it anyway. Wayfinder, the roller coaster is what's fun. Don't get on the roller coaster if you don't like roller coasters.
What was the takeaway from Ruin King? It's such a cool game, and now with them shutting down all the League of Legends side stories and external game developments and stuff like that, is there a conclusion on your end about that entire process?
I mean, The process was cool. That was probably the game that I was the most nervous about pulling off, strangely. It's such a big IP, and like we had no idea what it would be like working with Riot.
Yeah.
But it was pretty cool. I will say, like, having worked with, license holders in the past, I think it was a very good experience. We learned a lot from it. I wish that the game took off. I think we all had the expectation that it's the first non-MOBA,
Yep.
League of Legends game. Holy shit, it's going to be so big. And I don't know, I don't feel like there was a ton of support for it. I don't know, why, I don't know if maybe they just felt like, let's keep the focus on League and stop distracting with these other things. I don't know. We didn't really stay in touch with, a lot of the Forge folks, and I don't know what happened with Forge that caused the games for them to shut them down. But I think for us, we made a pretty good game.
Yeah.
It was like an RPG. It felt like, hey, people that are into the lore of League of Legends are going to eat this up. And it was good. It did well for us, but it wasn't back up the money truck. It wasn't the rocket ship I think we hoped for.
Yeah,
but
it was pretty. It did better than Battle Chaser sales-wise.
Okay.
But it's still a pretty niche genre and type of game. And I think if it had been, and not by any means our biggest budget title, because the mantra from Riot was make small games, make completable games, make them fast, and that's pretty much what we did. And it was successful in that regard, and a lot of fun. I like that. I was at EVA with my son a couple weeks ago, and 2XKO was there, and
Right.
I enjoy now that I can stand there and look at it and play it and feel some connection to it. It was almost the entire roster of Ruin King, Alawi and Yasuo, Braum. It was cool seeing. So feeling a connection to League through Ruin King is probably one of the most interesting, unexpected benefits of having worked on the title.
Yeah.
And yeah, Riot was actually great to work with. And I say actually because
That's
you
fair.
expect working with such a major IP and a huge company that it's going to be extremely difficult, to put your mark on the IP. But really it wasn't. We enjoyed the whole development process. It was good.
Yeah. Joe, when you think about kind of your history in games, is there one game you keep thinking about of being the sweet spot for God, that one felt right. That one felt great.
The sweet spot. I think for some reason, I think the one that will always hold a special place. I think it would probably be the first Darksiders game.
Yeah.
Even though the second one is probably a better game, I think the first one was just we were just so fearless and just, I don't know, we had no rules. We were just making this crazy Dark Zelda game with angels and demons, and just, I feel like we didn't worry as much back then. Or me personally, creatively, I feel like I worry now about how will this be received? How will that be received?
Was it Game Informer that quoted you as saying, Miyamoto, the gauntlet has been thrown?
It's like Zelda with balls. I don't know who said it, but I definitely never said those words. But it was so weird because there was a quote from me in there, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds like something.
And then in their words, they said, Miyamoto, the gauntlet has been thrown. And we're like, no,
we're
thrown.
We're not. I surrender.
The gauntlet down.
But I think that it was just so fun, and we kind of had no idea what we were doing. And
yeah.
But at the same time, because of that, we were just so ambitious, and we found a way somehow to compete with some of these much larger studios, and then the second one was a lot more polished. And of course we could not just continue what we started. We had to make a whole new character with different movesets and stuff, which would be a precursor to how we always do everything. Is don't use anything from
Don't
before.
do anything rational.
Yeah. Efficiency. But that one, and honestly, our first game as Airship, Battle Chasers, It was a Kickstarter. It was such a scrappy, small team. It was between 6 and 8 people for most of the development of that game.
Whoa.
I think we had 11 at the end, I'm pretty sure. But
Yeah, 10.
it was we did so much with so little. And, you look at it now, you can tell it's a small game, but it's I still feel like there's something so pure about it. And again, we didn't really we were only answering to ourselves. Maybe that's the thing. It's like whenever we don't have somebody above us telling us what to do or not to do, or
and THQ was the publisher, but they were really hands-off.
They're so hands-off. They're like,
great
whatever.
partner.
I don't think they even ever asked what the story was or like what was going on. If we were like, hey, we need to make this change for this reason, they're like, okay, cool. Yeah. I will say they always like gave us a lot of creative freedom. So I think those are. It's not that I don't enjoy working on other people's IP. It's just that there's something like really pure and fun about trying to figure stuff out for yourself.
I would say those two games for me too, since the only games we've ever worked on, we worked on together. There's something special, I think, about firsts, and Darksiders was just our first game, period. First notable game, right? It was really, I don't know how we did it. THQ was crazy for continuing to support it for as long as they did, honestly, because we really didn't know what the hell we were doing for the first year. And it wasn't until we got the first real dungeon done, which became the Twilight Cathedral. I think of them in dev names. I sometimes forget what they were called in the game. When we played that dungeon, we were like, holy shit, this is going to be a badass game. And then the team, that was like Death March Crunch.
Am I crazy? Did it take as long to make that first one as all the other ones? Like close?
The Twilight Cathedral basically happened roughly, it was over 50% of the way through the game's development cycle, and then the rest of the game was made after that. So the stuff before that was basically us fucking up until we went, oh, okay, now we got it. And then we paid the price, though, in that second half, because, man, that team worked to death, which isn't cool, right? Like, it was an incredible amount of work and not something we would do intentionally. But like I said earlier, when you survive that, the team can go one of two ways. It can fracture because the thing falls apart, or when the game is good, I think it's, it's like coming back from battle, but getting to celebrate victory. It was very satisfying. That felt so good to ship that game.
Yeah.
And then Battle Chase was different because Airship was, again, a brand new studio. It was our first time really shipping a game as an independent studio, because Vigil was acquired like 9 months or 12 months into its existence by THQ for, like a couple of Starbucks gift cards or something like that. I don't know why we said yes. We never would have shipped the game if we hadn't, though.
Sure.
But
paycheck.
A paycheck. That's what it was. How quickly I forget. But shipping Battle Chasers as a small team, as a studio, independent from beginning to end, that felt so good. Both of those games are the best. Yeah.
And so that is the sweet spot, is just not having anybody above you. Have people like come in and tried to buy the studio here?
Yeah, it's happened. It's happened in the past, but we're still independent.
Okay. How serious do those discussions get?
Some have gotten pretty serious. Yeah, some have gotten pretty serious.
Okay. Do you think it's in your future?
I almost did the Kip Napoleon Dynamite quote. They think are getting pretty serious.
But you're feeling like we want to stay independent. That is our happy spot.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, where our rule has been, we don't really have rules. We just do what allows us to feel. This may sound cliche, but if you're not enjoying work, then we're never going to do something that makes us not enjoy work again. We've been in that situation a couple of times. Obviously, towards the end of Wayfinder's time as a live service title, it felt that way. So that's what we want to avoid. And if there was the right partner, then we would definitely say yes. We're not going to make that arbitrary rule that says no, we're going to stay independent forever.
Sure.
If you do that, then you're just setting yourself up to be wrong, right? Yeah. But it's not something that we are specifically. We're not trying to change that right now.
Yeah. So if you could, with your producer mindset, go back to the early stages of Darksiders 1's development, what were you guys doing when you were f***ing around? What was going wrong? What would you stand in front of the team and try and coordinate better?
There was one thing we couldn't do, and that was find the fun. I mean, it was a brand new IP, brand new engine, because people didn't really license off-the-shelf engines back then.
And early on, it was like, it was David Adams wrote that engine, and so when you're on a team, it's like, oh, we're waiting for the tech for that. It's like, why isn't this? And it was like Dave was like the guy, and it was like his engine, and he was doing it all. Plus, we were still building a team. I mean, we were building an IP, a team, and an engine all at the same time.
Jesus.
Usually you try to do like one of those things. not all together. So yeah, and then we'd get stuff in and it's just not fun. We're like, this isn't good. I don't know where to go. The camera's terrible. Like the puzzles aren't good. Combat's not fun.
We learned why there wasn't a lot of competition in the Zelda genre.
Right.
Because it's fucking hard. And we're like, oh yeah, this is hard. This is why everybody, when we were pitching,
we're like, remember we wanted to make 4 playable characters online with this? We can't even get one.
Oh, what noobs. Yeah, and I remember we were pitching at E3 and everybody who met with us are like, how big's the team? We're like, 4. And they said, how many console games have you made? None. And you want it to be 4-player co-op online? Yeah. Like, no, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah. And I remember at that E3 we had a great meeting with Sony, and they were like, this prototype's really fun, because we had this working prototype on this broken ass monitor that we were carting around, and they were like, it just feels so good, but your team is so small, you will never ever make a next gen game. Please stop. What about PSP? We have this thing.
Hey, there we
go. Do something for us. And we were legit excited about that. We're like, okay. Because they were like, at that time, building a 15 or 20 person studio seemed reasonable, but building a 90 to 100 person studio was like,
they've got it was called the Oblivion engine, or Oblivion editor in the Oblivion engine. Really confusing, because like a year later Oblivion would come out.
Right,
and so
right.
it never, it was named before Oblivion existed. But we had that running on a PSP, and I remember I was doing like a gray box for a Sly Cooper on PSP because we were talking to Sony.
Right.
Are we allowed to say that? I don't know. It was so long ago.
It's been out there. I'm sort of trying to figure out that timeline. So was that the pivot then? Is you were showing Darksiders and Sony said, hey, why don't you make it for the PSP? Also, why don't you make Sly Cooper on the PSP? Or how did that timeline square together?
I think it was the next E3 after that. We talked for a little while, but the E3 after that was where THQ saw wait, maybe it was the same year.
So
it was the same year. My timelines are...
Yeah, we started Vigil, then we worked on the prototype that we took to E3, and we had a PC strapped to a suitcase with a monitor, and we were dragging it through the thick carpet of E3 from going to booth, just saying, hey, can we show you this? Just begging for a pitch meeting. Like, because you don't do it that way anymore, but that's how we did it. And the monitor fell off the suitcase carrier and broke, and so we were showing it on a cracked monitor. But yeah, it was after that. Then we took a contract deal with NCSoft. We'd all left NCSoft, but we took a contract with them to work on a game for them, and we did that for 9 months while we were doing follow-ups with everybody who would listen. We were talking with THQ. We'd pitched Darksiders at that E3, and the conversation was kind of moving along slowly because they were undergoing some internal change too at the time, I think. And Sony was also talking to us, and we had flirted with. They had thrown out the idea of, what about a Ratchet and Clank game on PSP? I'm a huge Ratchet fanboy. Yeah. I was like, yes, please, that. And then it turned into Sly Cooper. And I think actually we had a pivotal moment where THQ had come and said, okay, you can make Darksiders, but you have to come internal to THQ. Like, you have to become a THQ studio. At the same time, NCSoft wanted to renew the contract to keep working on the title we were working on for them. At the same time, I think Sony was expressing interest. There was no formal contract in a 6-month prototype for something on PSP, and we had to pick. We're like, which one of these do we want? Like, 2 where we stay independent, but neither of them are Darksiders, which is what we wanted to make,
right.
Or go internal to THQ, basically in exchange for a paycheck, but get to make the game we want to make. So we give up the company, and really though, we looked at it and we're like, there's no way we're going to get to make this game if we stay independent. For all the reasons people laid out to us very colorfully at E3 when we were pitching it. So we chose THQ.
Yeah. What happened with the Ratchet and Clank thing? Why did it go for Sly over Ratchet and Clank?
Actually, I think at the time it was because in the window of time where we were discussing it with them, they gave, was it Ready at Dawn? Ended up doing
somebody else had already snagged that one.
Oh, yep. Wow. Okay. So then it was like, okay, what else we got? Sly Cooper. Do you like Sly Cooper?
Which I also loved. I was also
we have done pitches for, can we say, I don't know, like Castlevania, DC, games, like just anything that you could think of, we've done. There's so much stuff that I forget about. We'll rummage around in old archives and be like, oh my God, remember this pitch? And we're like, you you do have to be flexible, and you have to like just cast a wide net. I wish that we could say, we went into this and this is the one thing we wanted to do and we stuck with it. It just, for financial reasons, team size, like all kinds of, like what the industry is looking for. Because weirdly, at that time, I didn't even want to go to that THQ meeting. I remember because they were doing, it was like licensed games like SpongeBob,
right,
wrestling. They didn't really have IPs. And weirdly, they were like, we really want to have our own IP that's like kind of God of War-ish and whatever it was. We were like, holy shit. Like, what are the odds?
We showed up late.
One publisher.
It was the last meeting of E3. We showed up late with a crack monitor. The guy we were pitching to did not want to be there. He looked like he was half dead. We walked in and we're like, this. We
laugh about this all the time, though. Yeah. We know him very well.
Yeah, we're like this. We almost didn't go, but we dragged ass over there anyway. And we went in, and they had their own TV. So we hooked up the PC to the TV, and he's like, we're all about to fall asleep as we're setting the PC up. But then as soon as he started playing it, you could see this noticeable change in posture where he just kind of sat up and he's like, what the hell? Like,
he was like, hold on, I want to get somebody. I'll be right back. Yeah. And he left, and we're like, wait, that means he likes it, right? Or not? What's going on? And then somebody else came back and played it and was like, can you air dash? Oh, wow, you can.
He loved it so much that 9 months later they said yes. That's a lesson you learn.
Yeah, but then a year later after that, Nintendo emailed and was like, hey, are you guys still working on that Darksiders game? Whatever happened to that? We'd love to see where it is. Yeah. We're like, we like signed it like a year ago.
The best Nintendo story, though, is when we were doing follow-ups with everybody we'd pitched Darksiders to at that first E3. I remember I shared an office with Dave, and he was like, oh, Nintendo emailed us back, because he emailed everybody and said, hey, let us know, would you like to see more information? We have, an updated demo we can send your way, whatever. I looked at his monitor, he just kind of rolled back. He's like, check out their response. And I saw his email, hey, would you like to see more information? And the response was, no.
But
they did follow up with us later.
No, like, Dave, no. Regards. It just was no. I'm pretty sure it was Nintendo.
Well, before that, when I was making calls for that E3 to try to like line up some publishers ahead of time, I'm like, let me just email and call. I would like look on websites and like try to like stalk people and see who I could reach.
Well, sure.
And I got a hold of someone at EA, and we had argued about what our team size would be, because it was like 4 or 5, but you can't tell that. We quickly learned to a publisher. So we're like, we're gonna lie and inflate the numbers. And they were like, how big is your team? And I was like, oh, what should I say? And Dave or you or somebody was like, tell them like 30. And I was like, oh my God, that's so many people. It's going to be like 30. And they're like, our next gen teams are 90 to 100 and whatever. We're not interested by. And I was like, oh, 30's not enough, guys.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
It was, I swear, I'm exaggerating, but that was like kind of the stuff that we had to deal with early on.
Yeah.
But
the main lesson I would say we took from that is I think we benefit. We definitely took some benefit as Vigil on Darksiders 1 from not knowing what we didn't know. We just dove in and we did it. Kind of was.
Never tell me the odds.
Never tell me.
Words to live by.
That's right. And then the lesson
with Wayfinder was sort of similar. We were like, I don't know, is it even possible? Let's just try it.
Yeah, for sure. But then Nintendo comes crawling back, right? Because then it was like, we're launching the Wii U.
I don't remember that.
Crawling. They were just like, what? Where's that game at? We want to see like where it is. And it was like too late. We already signed it like at least a year ago.
The highest rated version of a Darksiders game is the Wii U version of Darksiders 2.
There we go. Because remember, that was very exciting going in that office, because you guys had the prototype Wii U for Darksiders 2. That was a huge deal to have that top secret thing, right?
It was. We had to obey very strict rules for like, the room had to be, the windows had to be blacked out, and there could only be 2 keys to open the door, and all these securities and stuff for the Wii U at the time.
Do you remember?
We definitely adhered to.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, how long did you know about the Wii U before it was publicly announced then, do you think?
Oh, I don't remember. I actually don't feel like it was that long. Maybe it was.
I think it was like E3 2011.
That was such a crazy time. I really don't remember.
It's a blur. I get it.
Yeah.
I do have a couple quick follow-up questions. The Sly Cooper game, the concept art that's out there is like Wild West Sly Cooper?
You've
was
seen it. Interesting.
Oh, yeah. Was it like a time travel thing?
That, actually. It was, yeah. It was Shadow in Time? Is that what a code
Yeah, Shadows in Time. It was like, hey, he's always talking about his ancestors. Wouldn't it be cool if you traveled through time and actually met them and like played alongside them, and there was these themed like time period levels. There was like a Wild West one, like a feudal fantasy one, medieval, like prehistoric, like we didn't really have a lot of time to fully develop the idea, but that was the general.
Your Murphy riding a little mule was the coolest piece of concept art.
What about the tank? That was kind of cool. The tank wheelchair.
Yeah, I remember there's like an evil looking Sly or something. He had like red eyes, like a silhouette. Was that the big bad? Like his ancestor was also evil or something?
Yeah. Or like some kind of weird time anomaly that caused, that unleashed this villain or whatever.
Okay.
But we did see there was a time travel Sly game that came years later, but I think it was different enough. I don't think it had anything to do with our pitch, but it was just funny that it was an interesting coincidence. Yeah.
You never know how games.
Well, it's an obvious place to go. With
the pitch comment is funny though, because I don't know if we've ever actually said that. Maybe I don't know what stories we've told at this point, but when the first time we pitched Wayfinder, it was a game called Skylight, and it was a co-op Metroidvania, which is, we often work on like the bucket list of genres we want to work on.
Right.
Zelda, Darksiders, Final Fantasy, Battle Chasers, and Ruin King. Wayfinder, like MMOs, close as we could get anyway.
Yeah.
But before that, it was a 3-player co-op Metroidvania. A lot of the same mechanics. It had the gloom, had re-rolling the dungeons, it had player housing. But when we pitched it, and it was like a mid-tier priced game, but publishers were like, we don't know how to only spend $6 or $7 million on a game.
Right.
That's where it would have cost way more than that anyway. But so they said, we love everything about this, the art style, the gameplay hooks. How can you make it 30 million? And we're like, okay, do we hear that question right? Like, how do we make this game more expensive on purpose? So we just said, well, let's make it 3D like a Darksiders game.
Yeah.
All the same mechanics, same world, same everything, just as a third-person action game. And so we had to change the name then. We wanted to pitch it as something new, so Wayfinder was born. So that multiplayer Metroidvania, though, maybe that's our next pivot.
It could be, yeah. It's a fun lesson in the game industry of you really need to ratchet up your pitch to get funding from publishers. You need to say, this is going to be more expensive, going to have a bigger team. And at the same time, the more expensive a game is, and the bigger the team is, the less sustainable the game developer is. And then that's the cycle that the game industry goes on forever.
It's a part of it. And the actual underlying business explanation is that if you think of things from Microsoft's point of view, this is old Microsoft back then, or any publisher that has a lot of money they want to put into a portfolio of games. There is only so much time you can spend managing projects. So if you say, throw a big number out there, like they have $300 million worth of development funds available, even if you put it all into $5 million titles, there's no way a publisher can actually manage that many projects, right? So you start dividing it into fewer bigger chunks so that the workload to actually get the titles out is more manageable. Is that a good or bad business model? I don't know, but I do know from just a human standpoint, like it is a lot of work to manage 40 or 50 titles. So
the problem with those bigger bets, though, is if they fail,
that's right,
you're screwed. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, yeah, and it is very. We know because we lived it. It is very reasonable to make games on quality games. The 3 titles before Wayfinder were all reasonably priced games development wise that were pretty high quality. Were they AAA? Nah, but they were pretty good and they were all profitable. So you can do it. What's harder is everyone wants to chase the big bet of the runaway money train, like a live service title, right? Which is theoretically you're drowning in cash, but then you get what we had, which were some unsavory monetization practices in the chase of that. And money drives everything, and consumers are now voting with their dollars, and they're voting those types of games out. So hopefully we'll see less and less of those. There's one less of them with Wayfinder changing. But I think consumer behavior is going to influence the industry to move away from that stuff. Even if it's enticing, if people just don't spend the money on it, then the business is going to change.
Yeah, and it's enticing, but you look at a studio like Bungie, some of the best in the biz to ever do the live service game, and even they were building, and now it's like, okay, nope, we got to have huge layoffs. It's just not sustainable here after all. So what are we striving for? It's not Bungie.
Can't really speak for them, obviously, because I haven't been in the doors, but the pandemic definitely drove there was so much money coming in because everyone was putting money into games that I think it was probably tough for some studios not to chase explosive growth. Even though I think all logic told you that was not going to last forever. So I think that was the real mistake, was in chasing the dragon of bigger, faster, more, like just work on 20 prototypes all at once, and some of them will land and we'll be rich. And I think that was maybe a risky decision that some studios are paying for, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know about Bungie, but
yeah, it's funny to think of your careers and just how things seem to be coming up again and again. And like, tell me if this is a stretch, but I remember visiting Vigil. You had the big team that was devoted to Warhammer 40,000, Dark Millennium Online, like that big MMO, right? That was going on down there. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there an effort late with THQ to try and convert that MMO into a single player game? Was it kind of a model of that big conversion that you thought of at all with Wayfinder?
No, I mean, if I remember correctly, that was at the very, very end. Like,
yeah,
the MMO version of Dark Millennium was still in development when THQ shuttered, and I don't think, unless maybe someone that acquired the rights to it, no one would have acquired it. I don't think that ever happened.
Okay. It underwent a big pivot before anybody had ever heard of it, because it started originally as like a WoW clone, tab target, bar of abilities, and at some point the decision was made, the correct one, to say, this needs to be like an action game, like a shooter. Yeah. And so really it could have been great. In usability testing, when this pivot was made to basically internally, it was described as like Gears of War Online, right? It started look and feel more like Gears of War.
Yeah, we had like a cover system and stuff. It was kind of cool, vehicles.
Oh, nice.
Usability testing scored really high for that title. I think it was setting some new standards for THQ in terms of the scores it was getting in usability testing. It's an MMO, and it happened right when THQ was hemorrhaging cash. So the first thing you get rid of is the biggest title that's the furthest away from being done, and that's every MMO. So it didn't survive really for that reason. The game itself was awesome.
Yeah, just because I'm in a historical mindset and a preserving history mindset with Game Informer going down and everything, but like a big project like that, the MMO for Dark Millennium, is that just lost to the wind? Is that just sitting on some hard drives in people's houses at this point? Is there a THQ warehouse? Or, I mean, what do you think about just all of that work? Where is it now? Does it exist on planet Earth?
I don't know about DMO.
Yeah, I don't know who got that stuff in the sale. Would that be part of the Vigil?
No, I mean, I would guess that the rights probably reverted back to Games Workshop, and
yeah, but like the assets.
Yeah, I have no idea actually.
It's on a hard drive somewhere. Hopefully. I sure don't have it. I once in a while will look up on YouTube the trailer for it and be like, oh man, remember this? It still looks kind of cool.
It's sitting in a landfill next to someone's Bitcoin hard drive.
I'm curious, after Darksiders 2, you were working on a game called Crawler. That was also another co-op game. Again, these co-op games, just it feels like every generation of your career is, all right, another co-op game, here we go.
What a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Was that the project you're working on right after Darksiders 2 that you were the lead on, Ryan, or was that another thing?
Yeah, I was the world team lead, because we broke up into feature teams, because I was the lead level designer on Darksiders 1, and then I wanted to get a taste of production, so I'm credited, I never should have done this. I was credited as a producer on Darksiders 2.
Right.
But really quickly, probably for the last year, I just was back mostly wrapped up in level design. So then when we started working on 1881, I went over as the world team lead. Sorry, well, so it's, I guess, known to the world as Crawler. Internally, our title for it was 1881. Like, we have posters that say 1881. So I think of it as 1881. THQ, I don't think, liked that name, and so they called it Crawler, I think is why the name Crawler is out there.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a really cool game. I think you see a lot of that game's DNA. That was also in the Oblivion engine, which is the old Darksiders 1 and 2 engine. That's all, every single scrap of code and art for that is long gone. Some of that informed, there's some DNA from that game in what we were working on at Crytek USA, which is called Hunt.
Right.
Crytek, when they shut Crytek USA down, and I had left and started Airship with Joe at that point, that game went internal to the team at Crytek, and they changed a lot about it. It kind of looks like the Hunt that we were working on at Crytek USA. But, you know, props to them. They made a really cool game out of it. It's very different gameplay-wise than what we were making at Crytek USA. Yeah. But I think the Remnant franchise definitely has a lot of what 1881 was kind of starting. The combat is very different because it's, you know, Souls-like now. Souls with guns, which is really cool.
Right.
But there are some, like... And actually, in Wayfinder, in a bit, you know, in a way, the way like the random generation occurred and the way the world was laid out.
Sure.
It influenced both those games.
And I take it was taking place in 1881?
It did, yeah. It was like that era.
Oh, cool. Was it bizarre then to see PlayStation make 1886? Okay, what the hell?
It was weird. It was weird. But being single player, I think we were still working on 1881 when that game was announced. And we're
The Order, yeah.
Like, you know, because it looks so good.
Also, yeah, the amazing quality of it didn't really help. It was like that game looks good.
Yeah, and also it's Ready at Dawn again. Like, God, they take the PSP games, they're taking the 1880s, they're taking all of our stuff, man.
That happens so much in the industry, though, because, you know, there are only so many original ideas, and I can't count the number of times that we've thought we had an original idea, and then you work on it for a while, and then somebody else announces that they're doing something almost the same or eerily similar, and it's before you.
They were kind of like this kindred studio, though, because I remember I knew the art director there, Rue, and like they they were another very small studio that worked on like games that felt like they would have a bigger team behind them. They were like super quality, and like they worked on like the Daxter game, and then I think they worked. Sony pretty much snatched them up for a while. They did a God of War.
Yeah, they bought him. Right? They bought him. I think at some point.
Bought him.
I can't cross.
Yeah, I think Facebook eventually bought him. Then it was all a confusing web. But yeah, no, it's funny. I always think back to.
But for a while there, we were both like I think looking at what the other guy was doing. Like, look at fucking those guys are making something awesome. Like I was really. They were one of those small studios that always just turned out awesome stuff. So I think hopefully that's the kind of stuff we were doing at the time and can continue to do. But
yeah, what was your Castlevania pitch? When did that happen?
Okay, so actually, that turned into Wayfinder in a weird way because we
did. There was around the time of Darksiders 1, though, we did talk to Konami as well about.
We pitched a Castlevania.
Yeah, a Castlevania.
Yeah.
It happened twice. This one was more official, though, because...
So hang on, just to be clear, it would have been Darksiders, would it become a Castlevania game?
Yeah, 3D.
I think when we pitched it to him, we said, this could easily be a Castlevania game. You should really do one in 3D. And that was before, I think it was before Lament of Innocence. Or it had just come out.
The Shadow.
Lords of Shadow.
It was definitely before Shadows, but I think Lament of Innocence was PS2.
Okay.
Underrated soundtrack.
At that time, though, they were definitely not like keen on like a Western studio touching Castlevania, and I could see why. I'm like, it's cool, it's fine.
Yeah.
But then when we pitched Skylight, we were pitching Skylight around. Before it became Skylight, we did do. Someone at Konami reached out to us and was like, "Oh, we know you're huge fans of Castlevania and like."
Okay, let's waste a bunch of time.
Would you ever do
it actually
pitch?
started with the Suikoden fan art you did. That got Konami's attention.
Let's rewind even further.
Yeah.
You never know. Like, yeah, so I'm a huge fan of Suikoden 1 and 2, and I did this fan art for this restoration project or whatever, and like they were trying to push to like relaunch the Suikoden games.
Yeah.
Someone that was there was like, "Hey, I didn't know you were a fan." We were talking unofficially, just in DMs and stuff. And then how did the Castlevania thing come up?
He was a producer there, and then you mentioned, "Oh, we'd love to work on a Castlevania," and he said, "I can probably get you in touch with people, and you can pitch them something."
Yeah.
You know, email chains happen, and we end up putting together a short pitch. There's some fan art of Simon Belmont that's out there that was like the main piece of art that was done for this pitch. We titled the game just as an homage, Super Castlevania 5.
Awesome.
So we had a Super Castlevania 5 logo, and it was pitched as, wait for it, a multiplayer Metroidvania. It was going to be the first Castlevania game that would be a true, because it was Castlevania HD on Xbox Live Arcade, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But we wanted a real like co-op Metroidvania. One way or another, that didn't work out, of course. And then we said, this pitch is so awesome, though. Let's just make one. So then we turned it into our own game called Skylight. We changed basically everything, like all the art, everything about it, but the core concept of it made it randomly generated, all that stuff. Then we pitched that as Skylight. Pitched it for about a year. Got the consistent feedback that they're a hard game to make, or it either has to be a super indie budget to be a Metroidvania, or it's got to have a bigger budget, and then it can't be a Metroidvania. So then it turned into Wayfinder. So yeah, so we get in fan art, Wayfinder.
I mean, this is what it takes to survive in the game industry, though. Is just
the butterfly effect.
These types of
games.
wild pitches, being flexible, reconverting everything into something else, keeping these ideas alive. It's mind-boggling.
Well, even Riot, when they came to us, they were like, Battle Chasers was dope. How about that? But with
our little Kickstarter game that could, Riot Games was like, hey, Battle Chasers is cool. Could you make a game like that in the League of Legends universe? And we just thought that was the funniest thing because, like you got to do 100 meetings for one successful one.
Right.
And we're like, this is definitely not going to happen. And they were like, hey, no, can we talk next week, tomorrow? Are we doing this? And we're like, I think they're actually serious. The hell?
So
cool. It took us a while. It took a while before we took it seriously. We're like, are they actually going to do this? What, are they crazy? Yeah. Then they, talked about their whole plan for Forge, and it wasn't just us. They had a vision for these types of games, and it started to make more sense.
Yeah, they chose great partners for sure. What do you think was
there were a lot of cool Forge games? You need to play more of them. There's some really cool ones.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think was the most exciting meeting you ever had in your career? Something that stands out for the one that you walked out of, like, holy shit.
Oh man, there are a lot that. So the show Silicon Valley, it's almost cathartic for us because
it stresses me out.
Different industry, but I'm like, oh god, this hits way too close to home because you go into a meeting, you think it's gone so well, then there's the scene where they're at the San Francisco Giants stadium and they're being wooed by this investor and they think they've nailed it, and then cut to the next day where they're in their offices being negged by these guys who are suddenly no longer interested. That roller coaster is what it's like pitching. I'm trying to think of one that was exciting.
Yeah, I mean they all are in their own way, right? But I'm trying to think of the most exciting.
The DC pitch, was that one for you, Joe? That was exciting.
The E3 one that I didn't want to go to?
No, the DC pitch. You said you.
Oh, the DC. That one weirdly didn't get. We did most of it offline, through calls and stuff like that. It was not. We weren't there in the office or anything.
Sure.
Although one of the scariest meetings for me was we got far enough with this discussion about a DC-based ARPG. We pitched it as isometric Overwatch with PvE. That was our pitch.
Cool.
Using DC characters.
Oh my god, that meeting was terrifying. Okay, I remember that
one. Yeah, so they come to the Warner offices, show it to a few people. A few people was, I walked into the biggest conference room I'd ever seen. And I think the president of some division of Warner showed up, and he had an entourage with him, or vice president. He was a big deal, right? Because he came in with people. And it was this long conference room table that sat at least 20-something people. And then all around the room, big conference room, was this stadium seating, and just more and more people kept coming in, more and more people, more and more people, more. It was must have been 30 or 40 people. It felt like a fucking TED Talk by the time everyone was seated. And then there was just silence, and everyone just kind of looks at us and goes, and I just went.
Even I looked at Ryan. I'm like, we're going to talk, right? I was like a deer in the headlights. It was so tense. I don't know. We were just like, wow, I think we're out of our element here.
When we started Airship, I do not like public speaking, and it's kind of taken that out of me because meetings like that, I just looked at it and I remember exactly what I thought. Because there's that moment of fight or flight where it's like, maybe I should just run out of the room.
Yep, makes sense.
Maybe I should just go.
Riot was just kind of fun. It was like low pressure. They already liked us. Like it was like, come to the Riot campus and eat at our cool cafeteria. And like, it's like walking around Disneyland. I was like, wow, this place is awesome.
I remember that Warner pitch though. I literally just went, F it. And I just stood up and started talking.
And it's like, hey, do you like Overwatch? It's like, what do you start with? What's the pitch there for the DC game? How do you do it?
Oh, it was a long process. It started with just like a 1-page idea, and then went through many like 20 and 30-page documents and pitch decks, and that was a long process.
Did you get to make jokes about Joe's history at Marvel and all that stuff? Like that was all.
Did you? I think you wore the Marvel greater than DC shirt to one of the meetings, right? I'm pretty sure you actually. Wore
Why didn't this project happen?
I used to have a T-shirt that said Marvel is greater than DC, and I would wear it around. I might have worn it as just to be funny to the meeting. I don't know, but I definitely wore it at a comic convention and got called out by a DC editor.
That was nice. Real quick, Joe, just because you drew them both, I'm sorry if you're sick about talking about it, but do you have thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I do think it's a movie for fans. I think if you're not really into comic culture, you'd probably enjoy it a lot less. But if you are, I loved it. I loved all the cameos. And I'm one of those people that lately that's like, no one makes movies for a story anymore. It's just to get audience reaction, constantly jokes. I do say shit like that sometimes. However, I was in there going, hey!
Yep.
I don't give spoilers, but whatever. Every cameo that was in there, all the little Easter eggs, I loved it. And Deadpool has a very special place in my heart too, because when I was just a young fledgling comic book artist at Marvel, I mean, I had my page rate was like $70 a page. For an 11 by 17, doesn't matter if there's one panel or 20 panels on there with backgrounds, doesn't matter how long it takes, $70. I got bumped up to 90 at one point. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God. I never got royalties. I didn't know what that was. I didn't work on books that had royalties. Like I did Excalibur or whatever. And like when Deadpool, they were like, I was a huge fan of Rob Liefeld and New Mutants and X-Men, obviously. And they were like, how would you like to do Deadpool's like first miniseries? And I was like, that's like he's like the coolest character. And so I did that book, and man, when I look back at it now, I was still learning to draw at the time, okay? But I got a royalty check from Deb. That was my first royalty check. And I remember like looking at the number and like just, there was a lot of zeros in there. Like I was like, look at...
What are we talking, like, 10,000,
You
20,000?
can make this much money in comics?
What was that number?
What
was the number for royalty checks?
I can't say the number.
Damn it.
I can't say the number. But back then, it was kind of like toward the tail end of the heyday of comics where books regularly sold like, 1 million copies, 2 million copies. Yeah. Anything Jim Lee did would be like 4 million copies.
Yeah.
Now it's like, if your book sells like 100,000 copies, it's like really good.
Totally.
50,000 is pretty good. But back then it was like any kind of like decent book sold like, close to 1 million or over. So it was just like
Battle Chaser did it
insane.
Right? That sold.
Yeah. And like honestly, like that was when I realized like I can now, like I'm going to be doing comics like forever. You can actually make money doing this. I was just doing it because I loved it and I couldn't really get into a decent college. So I was like, this is what I'm going to be doing now. But then I was like, oh, let me get serious. And then I would like talk to Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee on the phone and be like, guess who just called me? Jim Lee, ever heard of that guy? And I was like a kid. I was like probably 19 at the time when I was doing Deadpool. 18, I don't know. So it was like very surreal and like, I got to meet my heroes and it just like blew up from there. And then they were like, hey, how would you like to draw X-Men after Jim Lee leaves? And I was like, shut up. It's so weird.
Do you feel a weird sense of pride
times.
watching a movie like that? Of like, oh, these are kind of my babies in a weird way. I helped raise them,
or
in
just
their teen
having like an
years.
attachment to it,
Yeah.
or like that side of the business, the industry, and like even like X-Men '97
Yeah, of course.
blowing up was like very nostalgic, and like seeing a lot of the like that was like.
Did you say you got a special thanks in '97?
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the team that worked on it, like Chase Connolly, who directed a bunch of that. He was like, "Oh man, we had your comics out and
Oh, that's awesome.
stuff," and it was cool. Like I'm a huge fan of animation as well, so we all like the same stuff. We all like grew up on the same comics and stuff, so it was really cool to see. It's so weird that when you read comics back in the day when I was in high school, you didn't really like tell people, like it wasn't very cool. Now it's like everybody reads. Everybody goes to the Marvel movies, whether they read the comics or not.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's crazy.
it's crazy. Ryan, Wayfinder, home stretch. When's the 1.0 launch? When do you think it's gonna hit here?
Have we said what the release date is? I don't even remember. It's not far off. Not far
Okay.
off. Did we
Not
say?
far
I don't
Fall.
actually remember. Fall?
October-ish.
That sounds good.
Okay.
We did not say? I had people saying no, we did not say. Yeah. It's
Later this
months
year.
away, not
Later
years.
this year.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, fall.
Yeah.
Fall. It's coming. We're trying to get it. We're trying to get it out. I mean, a substantial amount of the work is done. Like you'd be surprised how many small logistical details create time when you're trying to do something as simple as, say, just become the publisher as far as Sony or Microsoft. We weren't on Microsoft yet, but Sony is concerned. And like right now, we're basically going through just some technical details to get certain achievements converted, because we have to have achievements converted so that we can get things submitted. And sometimes the back and forth, talking about one achievement that is blocking us from putting the game into submission, can take days, because you have a support ticket. It's almost all done through support tickets. You just say, hey, what about this? How can we fix it this way? Wait a day.
Yeah.
Well, no, you can't fix it that way. It'll create these problems. And you go, okay, well, what about this instead? Wait a day. And all of this adds up, and we're on the precipice.
It's almost there.
Of getting to submit it to Sony for certification so we can get the PlayStation out. But time is the enemy right now. But we're definitely in the home stretch. We're doing final testing on the new bits of content. I don't want to say bits because it's a lot.
Yeah.
The whole new zone, whole new Wayfinder, a lot of cool features. Some are quality of life. Some just completely change the game. At least remember the content that you have left to play. So there's some huge stuff that's coming in fall for that full release. To say nothing of a whole new platform with the Xbox. We finally got Xbox players in there too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, in any of
Yeah,
those,
we're excited.
When you're emailing PlayStation back and forth about the achievements, if you could just slip in something about like, if you need an isometric Sly Cooper game, we're available, we're independent, we're ready to go.
Yeah. We do know isometric very well. We joked when we started Wayfinder, we're like, holy shit, are we finally going to get to see the horizon? Because we had done 3 isometric games in a row between Battle Chasers, Ruin King, and Darksiders Genesis. So we're like, yes, we get to see the sky.
Oh, how exciting. That's awesome. Cool. Well, final thoughts, big takeaways, things you want to hit that we haven't hit on yet?
No, just we've been really happy and excited. Everybody wants to say, stop copying me with the way you sit. It's like, oh, we're really excited about the reception from players, but we really are.
Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it saved some of our devs here their sanity when we put the game out and people started playing it again, and the reception was good. And it was a little different than releasing the game, right? Because we were missing some of the notable press beats and just the noise you make when you really legit release a game.
Right.
That I think kept the game kind of quiet, and we're hoping that will be different for 1.0 when we leave early access, when we're on multiple platforms and we say that the game is, released and we get reviews, and we're just really, it's going to be nice to have some closure on this crazy path that Wayfinder's been on, but also knowing that it will conclude with a good game, and we keep that precious streak of all of our games being good games alive and intact, because it's a good game.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, Joe and Ryan, thank you for your time. Greatly appreciate it, guys. Thanks for the full stroll down your memory lane here.
Yeah, it was more fun than I thought it would be. So.
You'd need like a 3 or 4 hour show if we were going to do the full stroll.
Yeah.
But we took you on a little.
Yeah.
It's a tease.
Oh boy.
A teaser.
Yeah. Do it at happy hour next time, and you'll get some real honesty.
All right, that sounds good. All right,
Thank you,
thanks so
though.
much, Alf. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching and listening and sharing this interview. If you like it, there's a ton more in the MinnMax interviews playlist. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. If you thought, hey, this video wasn't bad, well, there's a whole lot more like it on MinnMax's YouTube channel. Please help us out by subscribing to our channel and checking out the MinnMax Show podcast, also available on your favorite podcast app, the best, most thorough discussion about games on the internet with the deepest dive, our monthly community trivia show with prizes called Trivia Tower, and a whole lot more. Thanks so much for your support, everybody. All you gotta do is click that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it.